Today we're in Selmer, Tennessee at Rose Creek Farms, Ray Tyler's Farms. I'm at the Lean Farming Summit. I'm here with Michael Kilpatrick, somebody who farmed in a shorter part of your life, and now you're in the consulting world, the education world. One of the speakers at the summit was Ben Hartman.
Absolutely.
Wrote The Lean Farm. It's a great book. I'll link to that below. What was your biggest takeaway from Ben, or what's something you really enjoy about what Ben does?
Yeah, so what I like about Ben does is Ben really brings it back to systems. And for you that's farming, if any business needs systems that survive. And I think what Lean does is it takes a look at everything on your farm and it eliminates that waste, and it also brings systems into play, which allow things to be repeatable so your employees can do them. And so it just makes sure that the processes happen on a regular, clean, lean basis.
Right. Yeah, his stuff is amazing. If you're looking to change your farm around next year, and I don't think this is just necessarily a flip the switch and it'll happen. There's going to be a lot of work involved, but I think Ben's work can really help you. It's based upon this whole idea. It's either adding value or it's adding to waste. If you think back to your days when you had your farm in New York, what's the biggest thing that you think Lean could have helped change? Where could you have rooted out some waste?
Yeah, so we had a lot of waste, and we had a really profitable farm. It was one of the top in our area, but one of my biggest things was overproduction. I just loved growing vegetables, and so I'd always plan a little bit extra thinking I could either sell it or, well, I might just need it. So we could have shrunk our farm probably 10%, doubled our profit margin, and not missed it.
So that little bit of extra production actually hurt you that much?
Yeah, because it stretched everything on the farm. It stretched our employees, it stretched our financial systems, and so it tied up cash that could have been used other places. It meant that we were weeding something, and when you move everything by 10%, that means now you've got all this extra time that could have gone to taking care of the 90% better. So one of the big things we work with farms when we do one-on-one is we figure out where the waste is and what they're overproducing and try to dial that back and just focus on. And we were also growing crops that really weren't making us money. Things like melons and sweet corn and potatoes, which in some contexts make sense, but in 90% of the farmers' context that we work with are just a waste of effort and resources.
Yeah, when you're small scale, I mean, I hear this consistently over and over from farmers. When you don't have a lot of bed space to allocate it to these other crops that are low value or take up a lot of space, doesn't make sense. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, on the overproduction side of things. If you think about overproduction, you're producing too much product. Where that's really going to hurt you, I'm thinking, is on the labor side, because that's where all the expenses. The seeds are cheap, you know, the water's cheap, your amendments are pretty cheap, but it's the labor of planting all the stuff you didn't sell, harvesting all the stuff you didn't sell, cultivating all the stuff you didn't sell, or maybe even packing all the stuff you didn't sell and bringing it home.
Yeah, so 50% of the labor on the farm is usually post-harvest and on, so harvest, post-harvest, and taking to the market and all that. So that's a lot. And it's also incredibly demoralizing for our crew. So they did all this work, and then they see a stack in the cooler of stuff that didn't sell, and so they're just demoralized. So it's a cyclical thing which really happens. And and then the other thing too is when you get a base cost to plant anything on your farm, if you're ground. And so if you're always taking up that extra ground with this crop, you're having to maintain that ground as well and keeping that weed free and that sort of thing. I think the biggest thing is all that weeding that you're doing and that crop care and then that harvesting.
You know, from talking to farmers here, and there's a lot of them, one thing that comes up a lot is weeds, you know, controlling weeds. Ray has parts of his farm that are more in control than others. You know, the older parts are more in control because they've dealt with them. What's your biggest suggestion for farmers who have a weed problem and they're overwhelmed?
Yeah, so a huge thing you can do is start putting down tarps or landscape fabric. So really taking the time to just take an area out of production and just let it sit and get it cultivated, get the tarps on there, start killing those weeds back. If you are putting crop on it, use landscape fabric. That eliminates the weeds as well. Because a huge problem I see farmers do is they decide they want to farm, they get so excited about it, they go out and till a couple acres up and then want to try to plant that same year. The problem, what happens is then all those grass weeds come through. And so when the grass weeds come through, they can't cultivate it. It's hard to get around. And so then what happens is your annual weeds come in. And so even if 2 years later you get rid of your perennial, the grass weeds, now you get all those annual weeds which showed up that first year because you weren't able to cultivate it well.
It's a problem, you're chasing it, and that's why, like, you know, some people have said if you can't keep up with your weeds, you're too big. You know, scale back, work smaller, work smarter, and that's the big theme for this event. keys for when you go to visit other farms. Can you talk about those points? Because I think that's invaluable. There's a lot of resources in your area. If you're watching this, you can get a lot out of traveling here, but you don't have to travel here. You can also get a lot out of visiting your local farms. But if you're going to visit them, what do you want to know? Yeah,
so first I like to do the background research on them and find out like the bit of history, so it more helps me contextualize and relate to them a bit better. And also, of course, it's always great to try to establish a relationship before you just show up. So I've been to a farm where all of a sudden just someone showed up and I was in the middle of something. So not that I didn't want to show them around and that sort of thing, but developing a relationship and developing a time or something, or just saying, hey, can I come volunteer for a day? Say I have my own farm, I'm doing this kind of stuff. I really think what you're doing is amazing. Can I come to your farm and visit and help you for a day? And most farmers are just more than happy to have you do that. But the other thing is really look at if they're open with this, talk about their numbers, talk about their marketing, talk about their context, what their start was, and try to, not just walk around and say, oh, this is cool, but try to see and find out what they're excited about. So one of the things I like to talk to farmers about is say, hey, what are you learning? And then what are you thinking of implementing in the next couple months? Because that's what's on the forefront of their brain, and that's what you're going to learn a lot from, because this is the forefront of what they're trying to learn as well.
And you've been on a lot of farms. How do you deal with the tendency to just want to see and do, the copy gene? Like if you're a new farmer, or if you're an inexperienced farmer, or just somebody who's learning something new from somebody, you might get excited about what they're doing, you want to do it, but is it a fit for your context, and how do you take the valuable knowledge from these other farmers and actually apply it in a meaningful way? Yeah, so one of the things we're here in Tennessee, and this is really super humid, and actually this whole week it's been 60, 65 degrees, so it's been beautiful. But someone in upstate New York has snow right now, and so that's completely different. And so I think the biggest thing is obviously to look at your climate, but also to look at your time context, if you're full-time, part-time, your mobility context, and don't just focus on one system. So, there's the people that came to this farm, but Ray is the first to tell you it's not going to work everywhere. He can move an incredible amount of salad mix and baby carrots for really high prices, but it's not going to happen everywhere. So look at what's happening in your area, make sure you're catering to your markets, and check out a lot of farms. So, Yeah, and these types of events are great ways to connect with a lot of farmers all in one trip, because there's a heck of a lot of farmers here. Learned a lot from people like Ben, Curtis, yourself, Ray presented, and I learned a lot from just talking to people at lunches. One thing I think a lot of people find out, and I knew this from my days of doing conferences, is when you sit down with other people who are in your sphere doing the type of work you do, you can talk shop and not have to worry about boring them, or they think you're crazy, when a lot of times the regular people in your life, you're the weird guy farming or the weird girl farming. Yes. So I think the best conversation was around the table late at night, and we were actually playing bagpipes at 11 o'clock at night one night at Ray's, which was great, a lot of fun. But there was just such great camaraderie and just interaction between people from Michigan to Wisconsin to Florida to Texas, just talking shop and talking systems and figuring out how their farms, and sharing Instagram handles. Yeah. That was a huge thing. Is let me follow your farm and see what your pictures are and what you're doing. Yeah, good, easy way to get some followers. Right? Exactly. So it's not just the sessions inside, but it's actually walking around the farm, seeing how things are interacting, playing with things, and then interacting with the different people at the conference, which brings the maximum amount of value. And hopefully those relationships continue outside of the event, and you can build off of them and learn from them. I'm here because of the relationship that I've built with people like Ray, with yourself, with Curtis. You've gotten to know Ray over the years. We're standing inside one of his high tunnels now. What do you think is unique about the way Ray Tyler farms that is pretty universal? Yeah. So the one unique thing that Ray does here is this high tunnel tells it exactly, is this is very cheap, high purpose infrastructure. So this is not one of your super fancy, and there's a place for that, but the place Ray is on his farm, he was looking for low cost infrastructure, and high tunnels are one of the best places for that. So this house grew tomatoes all summer, but now it's open. You see there's nothing planted here, and the first question, he's like, why is there nothing in here? And it's like, well, we wanted to have the tool summit, and we were afraid it might rain outside, so we wanted to have space so people could play with the tools inside. So it's just made an event space. Yeah. And then next week, this will be completely planted and be ready sometime in January or February. So just trying to keep
this structure that's probably cost, probably $4,000 to $6,000 overall to put up, he will make that multiple times back in this, because greenhouses are so universal.
When you look at a high tunnel, say of this same footprint,
Yep.
let's just say this costs $5,000, and if you look at a better one that has more features or is more expensive, let's say it's $15,000 or $20,000. What are you getting in those more expensive ones versus a cheaper one like this? In other words, what I'm getting at for people watching is, what are the trade-offs on a cheaper high tunnel versus one that takes more money?
Yeah, so the higher cost high tunnels you're usually automating. So you have roll-up sides that are automated, which are going to save your blossoms, and it can bring you higher yields. You get higher sidewalls, which means that you can walk along the sides and get better airflow and better air volume. The more volume you have, the less dips you have. So it keeps more of a stable operating environment. Less heat is used, less cooling is used. And you're also usually getting like steel, everything is steel instead of some wood. Wood will fail after a number of years, so it's just reliability and peace of mind.
When you look at a tunnel like this, what are your thoughts on somebody who's just starting out? $5,000 is not cheap, but it's not expensive in the grand scheme of things. I mean, for the value of this real estate and the product you can grow in here, it's relatively cheap compared to, some of the glass houses we have in California that might be $100,000.
Yes.
If somebody's got $5,000 or they're looking to budget something like this in, should a beginning farmer consider putting in a $5,000 high tunnel, or should they look at a Caterpillar tunnel that might be $1,000 and hold 4 beds over 100 feet?
Yeah, so if you're just getting started, high tunnels they're expensive. So a Caterpillar tunnel is a really good investment. So what we say is we need a place to propagate. So generally people just starting out can do that in their house under a rack of lights. It's not great, but it works. I mean, obviously putting a prop house would be nice, but then just getting some Caterpillar tunnels and getting some crop growing, so you're extending your season. Because if you're trying to grow lettuce in June when everyone else has lettuce in June, that's a great way to take lettuce home from a farmer's market. But if you can get it in April when everyone else brings it in June, now you're doing a unique product to the farmer's market and really, really setting yourself apart from those around you. So Caterpillars, if you can afford a high tunnel, go for it, but Caterpillars can be incredible, and we made an awful lot of money on our farm over the years with them.
What were the main crops you were growing? You were growing in New York, upstate New York, quite a few acres. Was it all greens mostly?
Yeah, so spring and fall greens and winter greens, and then the summer we do tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, ginger, and we actually, when we were just starting, we did sweet potatoes, because at that point it wasn't warm enough to do them outside. But we did them inside and we had a great yield.
If you look at a tunnel like this is what, single layer poly above us. How much are you gaining in terms of season extension, do you think? We're in Tennessee, so this will vary based on location, but here versus, right behind us in the field.
Yeah, so I think the rule of thumb is if one layer of plastic moves you about 400 miles south, so basically an environmental change of that much, or like 2 zones south.
Okay, so we've gone from where you would live in Ohio probably to about down to here.
At least.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a great advantage, and it also allows you to operate in the rain. It keeps hail out. There's so many advantages of a high tunnel.
And if you're growing a lot of product under high tunnels like this, eventually you're going to have to sell it. When it comes to farmers market, a big part of your presentation was talking about farmers markets. What's one tip you can leave people with here in the video about going to farmers markets and standing out? Yeah,
so the number one thing I will tell you about farmers markets is quality. Quality sets you apart and quality sells. And the other thing I would is be consistent. So even if it's going to be a down week and you know it, still show up. Your customers are coming to market, so you want to reciprocate and show up as well and give them quality product every single week.
A lot of great tips, a lot of great talk about the Lean Farming Summit. Is it going to happen next year?
We'll see. We've got big plans for 2018, and right now we're in the beginning stages of lining up different speakers and trying to figure out the whole schedule and what makes the most sense.
All right, so more ahead, and for people who want to follow you, you got a lot of education coming out online. You do all sorts of education on like post-harvest processing.
Yep.
You do consulting. Where can people go to find out all of that?
Yeah, so we obviously have a website, which is inthefieldconsultants.com, but our Facebook is the most up-to-date, constantly changing, new videos coming, and this winter there's going to be a lot of content because I shot the entire summer, multiple terabytes. And so now I just need to start pulling that out and sticking it out online for people to experience and learn new stuff.